team from Alumni India has put together. I'm delighted to be speaking about the innovation in biotechnology companies and the evolution it has happened over the years. Let me start with how I visualize how the transformation in the industry took place. As I was graduating out of Manila at AIM, I was very fortunate to get a job at Bayer Pharmaceuticals. And Trinket, she's also dialed in today. She and I together, and Shenji, you spoke to a few days back. We all joined together at Bayer and tried to take this forward. The key competitive advantage of these companies, who were large that time, was to create chemical-based medication. And with that medication, they were addressing a very, very large set of population. And they were so carried away with that kind of a model that they completely missed out the round one of the innovation, which was the biological antibody transformation. There's only one company who actually took, as a large pharma, who took a little bit of a space in the biotech world, was Roche, where Trinket actually landed up working eventually there. And they kind of took a 50% stake in the company and tried to look at that. But most of the companies missed this growth in antibodies, and multiple biotechnology companies started. In 1989 was the first launch of Epogen, which was done by a company called Amgen. And it was a strange time when nobody believed biologicals could actually make some money. Their peak sales were forecasted worldwide as 200 million. Very little funding was available for them. So they had no other choice but to kind of pull inside their own structure and try to raise money in the market, which was very, very hard during those times, and kind of build a global infrastructure. Eventually, Epogen, many of you probably have family members who take that, landed up becoming $8 to $10 billion drug, and Amgen becoming a $100 billion company. Right at the same time, the innovation on antibodies were going on in a small company called Genentech, which eventually was bought out by Roche for $100 billion, $89 billion or so. And this was only around 10, 12 years back. And the growth was completely missed by large pharma, because it took them a long time to transform from their traditional mechanism to the new world. I was fortunate enough when I was working at Bayer that I got an opportunity to work in 2005 in one of the companies, Alexion Pharmaceutical, which was actually an antibody company which was moving forward. So I'll give you a little bit of a story on that and what the transformation took place there and what were the challenges. And then this was the world of monoclonal antibodies, where you kind of take antibodies out of hamsters and mice, and then you kind of reprogram them and put it into human beings and trick them as their own antibody to fight diseases. And really bad diseases were being addressed, like rheumatoid arthritis. We had cancer-related drugs, severe anemia, multiple diseases that were considered very difficult with the chemical compounds were being addressed by these antibodies, which were mainly infused on your arm with a needle. So that transformation has been, that changed the biotechnology sector significantly. Now it's getting close to $1 trillion sector, which was really, if you look back around 1990s, this was a very small sector. Then now, as we are sitting at this junction, the next growth level that for the next 30 to 50 years, people are trying to take a bet on is cell and gene therapy. And I'm going to talk about that because in the context of COVID today, this has become a big discussion topic in multiple biotechnology companies here in US and also in Europe. So let me talk about the round one and how as an employee of Alexion Pharmaceuticals, where I joined with 3 or 4 people, and we built it took it from a 600 million company to a 40 billion company. And what were the challenges and how did we land up there? So just to give you a perspective of the overall market, how and why things happen, if you look at the gray shaded, the bigger gray shaded, this is the total population, right? So when you look at the big bucket, 133,000 per million hypertensive patients are there. Why this is important is this is where the big pharma plays. They want to go into diabetes, they want to go into hypertension. But when you start thinking about rare diseases where you had 650 people per million, this was the cancer market where you were slowly getting a higher price of $50,000, $70,000, $80,000 a treatment. And that market also, big pharma started getting comfortable over the last 20 years. Where they were so uncomfortable was when the patient population was 20 per million or less. And when I look at the drug that I had to deal with, that was the last one in red, it was 1 per million. So theoretically, in the United States, there were only 330 patients altogether. And we had a phenomenal drug. So how do you make a business out of 330 patients and still build a 40 billion company? That's the story I wanted to share with you in my next slide. So this was a stock chart, and I just wanted to highlight, because with the time frame and the challenges, first I wanted to, if you can see my cursor here, this is the time I joined. All analysts were saying there's 1,000 patients worldwide. You could probably do peak sales of 200 million, which if that was the case, I had to charge $200,000 per patient. Market cap running at 600. We had two indications of the same drug. One was going towards cardiovascular diseases, which was mainly in open heart surgeries where you can use this drug. And the other one was this small PNH, nobody even knew how to say this, 1 per million. And what really happened here is, if I look at this slide, the blue line, this one is Alexion, and the other one here is NASDAQ, and the green and red lines are the volume that was going on in trading. When we came to here around December of 2005, 3 months after I joined, the cardiovascular wing of that particular asset failed. And we had a phase 3 trial, which is the trial that is used to register your drug. It failed. The market cap now fell down to $300 million. And we had one chance that January we were going to get the second drug indication. And if that failed, we had to go into liquidation. So it was a tough time. But what happened here is, during that time is, when the January results came out on the second trial, it showed that it worked phenomenally well, to the extent that every patient who took it will have a life-saving therapy. The normal span of life of this particular disease was 5 years. And since the onset of the drug to your death was 5 years, and we were able to give these people a normal life to live all the way till 70, 80. And that looked like a really disruptive transformation, but there was no market. There was no market. The market cap didn't move at all. Market cap didn't move at all. The story of biotechs normally is that they'll end up getting bought by a big pharma, but no big pharma showed up to the door to buy us. So we had no choice but to kind of run the company. And then we sat down in a closed room and said, okay, what does it take to make it break even? And it was clear that we needed to get to around 200 million in sales to do a break even sales, and $200,000 a patient is not going to make it. The math was taking us to $400,000 a patient. And when we looked at the analogs at that time, we would have become the world's most expensive drug at that time to be launched in the United States and Europe. So we approached the governments, we talked to them to kind of give a life to these 350 people here and 400 people in Europe. And we got a tremendous buy-in, tremendous buy-in. What really happened here is then as you progress here and you start looking at this curve, why this went up is what we missed out in this understanding of the market of a rare disease is there is an input and there is an output. So if you theoretically say 350 people are alive, mathematically 70 people are dying a year and 70 people are getting this infection every year. This is a genetic mutation. So if you can stop the death rate, you would have an automatic growth because this is a chronic therapy. You would automatically have 70 patients growing every year. So there we were sitting now with an asset that would perpetually grow. There is no stopping to the growth. And we then took a stance here somewhere around 2008 that the analogs were showing that in 10 years time, we could be 1,000 patients in the United States. So we then took the path and we just took it to 50 countries ourselves because there was no other company willing to share or partner with us. And as we grew this company, then by 2010, the market caps were running around 10, 15 billion. And I was sitting at that point and saying, look, if I were to take this to a really large company, I've got to get out of this mode of one-trick pony. We've got to diversify. And if we have to diversify, we got to add more and more drugs. But we became a natural house for rare diseases where people had less than 20 patients. And therefore, we started accumulating a couple of drugs and more indications into the drug. Eventually, this company, by the time I left in 2016, was generating 3 billion in sales. But what I wanted to say is the hardest part was during this time was hiring the right people. It was one of the biggest difficulty as an entrepreneur. You go out there, you have to stand outside the door. And I wanted to share a story where around 2011-12, when that spike is about to happen here, I had to raise around $4 to $5 billion to buy few companies. And we just did not have the talent or the resource internally. So I looked around and I said, who do I know? And I called up Sanjeev and said, do you know anybody? And he said, hey, do you remember Prasanna? And Prasanna at that time was, he was 1 year senior to me in George Kapoor's class. He was running Barclays risk management in London. He was taking care of the global stuff. And I tried to call Prasanna, I tried to explain him my story, which is the biotech story. And it wasn't easy. And very soon we could figure out that Prasanna, I was losing interest to Prasanna. So I took a plane and I said, Prasanna, I want to come and spend a night with you and your family in London. I flew down and it took a while, 3 months of discussion. We even played a very interesting thing with him is his offer letter was actually carried by our managing director of Europe to his house. And he knocked at the door and gave him the offer letter. Finally, we got him in 2011. He landed raising $5 billion for us to do at a very, very low interest rate. And we had a phenomenal run after that, buying 3 companies, and we took it to the peak. At around 2016, there was, if you can see this big volatility here, we brought in a very high quality board as we thought. And the board was more towards big pharma kind of people landed up coming in an entrepreneur company. And then the discussion started about how different an entrepreneurial thinking and a large pharma thinking could be. And so we decided, the team, which was the leadership team, decided to pull back, and a more large pharma kind of team took it over and then move forward. So that was the story of this growth. I can talk about it more later, but this was all antibodies. This was all antibodies. And even when I left, the patient numbers were around 4,000 or 5,000 patients only globally, generating $3 billion sales. What I wanted to talk about as I move towards phase two, in 2010, Forbes magazine talked about our company, and that's the reason I try to stay away from press as much as I can. Nikhil and Asa, if you can recollect, somebody was trying to reach out just before this meeting. But it was not easy when you have this kind of a headline. You don't want to be sitting in front of the reporter at CNBC and talk about it, because if you don't do it, you can't create the innovation. And the governments understand that to save the lives of this small group, you've got to put that kind of a money on the table. Now, from then to now has been a very different. So large pharma was so shy at that time even to talk about $400,000 a patient. Now, when I look at just recent 2019 launch of the first gene therapy company of round two, done by Novartis, and they priced it at $2.1 million. But the big difference from round one to round two, which I'm going to talk about now, is round one was still, you can give the drug on and on for the rest of the life. So it was not a cure, and it is still not a cure. It fixes the symptom. If you think about cancer, they will prolong your life by 6 months, but they will not cure the cancer. So that's the round two that I'm talking about, which is actually Novartis is launching its first drug on that front this month or next, and they have priced it around $2.1 million. So the market has dramatically changed, and governments are rewarding these innovation. So now let me just talk about switching over to round two. So the evolution of round two really started in 2000 when human genome was fully mapped out. But really how to create drugs or therapies out of that didn't come until 2017. So it took 17 years for many of these companies and billions of dollars being spent on this. What are we really doing here, right? We are taking human cells out of the people who have the disease, and we find a way to modify those cells and put it back into those same people. So theoretically, there is no existing drug. The process is the drug. The process is the product. So it creates multiple challenges, right? It creates a challenge that you have to extract the cell from the human being who's infected, bring it to your innovation center, and then when you're playing with these cells, the viruses are your friends. What you do is you take viruses and you kind of clean them and you code them to go inside the cells and reprogram those cells. And then once those reprogrammed cells are created genetically, we then take it into an incubator and grow them and then put it back into the human beings. So one of the challenges in this process is what Shenzi was talking 3 days back, is how do you transport this? In the past, in biologicals, when you were in that round, you were talking about shipping it in a particular 2 to 8 degrees centigrade in a cold chain basis in a nice truck. But you can't do that with cell and gene therapy. It has to be cryopreserved, which basically means it's a big cylinder where you put the cells in and you freeze it. And that frozen state can stay as long as you keep it there. And once you take it out, it has to be infused within 24 hours. So that's the world that we're living in. It's extraordinarily personalized. So if I look at the right-hand side of my slide here, the chemical kind of business was running into solving problems of millions of people. Then we came into monoclonal antibodies where thousands were pretty good, right? So even FDA and the European authorities called 200,000 or less being orphan diseases, which were going towards this market. But now we're talking about personalized medication, a drug developed individually for one individual. And what I'm going to talk about in my next slide is how is this really done, right? So, when I was coming out of Alexion and I had a chance to meet Scott Gottlieb in a meeting, and I really liked his quote is, look, if you look at the next 30 to 50 years, he was just retiring out of FDA, and he's one of our consultants in our company now, that if you were to position yourself, you want to be in the front of the disruptive business, which is cell and gene therapy, where we're going to find cure. We are not going to be talking about giving the drug for the lifetime. Think about it. And so lots of companies were coming out. Only few had really had success. And I'm going to just show you in a while the map, what it looks like right after this slide. What this slide tells you is that two techniques we are using to solve a problem, a disease. The first one is called the autologous, where what you do is you take a person who's sick, who's got a cancer, you extract the cells. Then what you do is you take a virus, which is normally a herpes virus or adenovirus or a lentivirus, and you kind of clean that in our innovation center. We take the genes and we reprogram the genes, and we actually program. So the reason the viruses are used is viruses can enter the cell very easily. Nothing can, right now antibodies all work around the cell. They don't go inside. So now it enters inside. Either it has to blow the cell, you can program it to blow it, or you can ask them to go and reprogram it inside. And then in a bioreactor, which now with the new technology, if you think about the bioreactors that beer companies use are very big, but today's beer bioreactors are really 1.5 feet long, and these are disposable bioreactors. You create these cells in that, and then you ship it back to the patient and you infuse it. This cycle of work, this is where most of the drugs, 3 drugs have been introduced so far. These are all in this area. And what it does is it, from arm to arm, it is still taking 17 to 20 days, and we haven't found a better way to get beyond that. But technology is moving fast, and at some day we envision that we could have a 1 to 2 day cycle time to put that into the patient. So that's the innovation is so much in that area that is still undone. On the allogeneic side, what you are doing here is you kind of take healthy people, and then you take the cells out of the healthy people, and you program those cells, and you figure out how to expand those cells in a setting, and then you hoard it, and you find the infected person, and then you infuse it at the right time. But there is a matching process that has to be done either through blood group or some other algorithm. For example, I'll just talk about an example. If it's COVID-19, if we were to go in an allogeneic process, you would take, and you hear this story quite a lot in the papers these days, you would take the cells out of a person who's younger, who has had the infection, has recovered. You take the cells out of the person, and then you hoard it, and in a bioreactor, you can actually expand the cells. And so, for example, a pint of blood could then generate 1,000 doses. And then you look at the blood group match, or a haplo match, that's what we call it, with the infected patient, and you kind of give them 1 dose. And that cell is then going to go and replicate and work will be programmed to go and hit the virus. So some of the technology right now that is going on in the United States, how to fight with COVID virus, is also one of the process people are talking about, is also this one. But you could do that with cancer, you could do that with multiple other things. The risk on the allogeneic side versus autologous is, in autologous, the body easily adapts your own cell. But when you put allogeneic cell, there's always this risk that the body may reject a foreign cell. So you kind of have to figure out how to shut down the immune system of the recipient when you kind of give your cells to fight that disease. So it's a little complicated, that side. So what this slide tells you is, I wanted to take a minute to talk about this. When you look at the middle circle, this is how many drugs are marketed. Literally, there are 3 drugs out there. So the 3 drugs right now in the middle. But when you go further out, as further out means you are in the earlier stages of discovery, right? So we have 3 phases of discovery: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then you file for registration and then you market it. This process takes between 7 to 10 years. So if you think about how many people are playing in this market, and this is only the drugs that I'm talking about are in humans. You know, in the outer space where the white space is, around 1,000 drugs are there which are actually being tested in mice and hamsters and primates, which is not even in the scope. So when we came out of 2017, out of Alexion, we said, okay, how about creating an ecosystem where we could be an innovation center for lots and lots of these smaller companies. So when you look at this slide, what really comes to your mind is, once again, not even though large pharma is trying to play in this, they're playing it through acquisition, and you don't see a lot of names here in the innovation side. The innovation is happening in the small biotechs, and they put in a large sum of money. So if you go look at the center, the 2 drugs here, both have been, you know, Chimera was developed by Novartis, but Gilead didn't innovate that. They bought it for $10 billion. Then Celgene bought another company for $10 billion and entered the gene therapy. So, you know, it's a mechanism they've used to enter the market is through acquisition. So there's a lot of space. To put a cell and gene therapy manufacturing site costs you around 150 to 200 million. So one of the things we thought we could do is we could build an innovation center where some of these people can come to us, and we could do the production for them at a price. Because currently, you know, cost of goods per patient runs around $200,000 to $300,000, and we have to find a way to do it faster and cheaper and stay on the curve of the innovation. So we have to innovate ahead of the large pharma could do it. So we have created this innovation center in Waltham, Massachusetts. Now, we then also got thinking about it is what is in this space outside in the white, which is we are missing. And these are research institutes like Harvard, Mass General Hospital, Baylor College of Medicine, WashU. All of these people are doing innovation in this area at a rapid pace. But what happens is they then land up giving it to some of these companies here, which give them $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, and take their drug, and then they run. So we said, why don't we, you know, we don't have money, so why can't we do something more innovative than that? And so we created a model. We said, okay, this is our plant, which is in Waltham, which is going to be operational in July. If it, you know, I hope it is, because it has been shut down right now for construction because of COVID-19. But what we said is, okay, I'm going to build 10 of my own companies. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to bring an innovator from a company, from a university, make him a partner, and he is going to be independently being the chief scientific officer of that company, will own a large chunk of that cap table, very different than what a large pharma can do. And we will grow the company together. So in the process, I had an objective to do 10. I'm right now, I've established 4 of those companies, and all in cell and gene therapy that is utilize our plant. Then we will also utilize the other 80% of our plant capacity to generate revenue for all the companies that I showed you in the other slide. So how is this different from other companies? Is, you know, if other companies partner with these research scientists, they lose control of the drug, plus they don't get the upside when the actual drug starts making billions of dollars. So they kind of feel left out. So we've been pretty fortunate fighting this out. And one of the companies that I can quickly talk to you about is from Baylor College of Medicine. In 2018, I got a call from one of my colleagues that they are trying to get this drug. You know, it was phase 2 complete, cell therapy company. They were about to give it to a large pharma, and if there was any possibility for me to create a company for them. So we went there, spoke to the scientists. These are world-class scientists. One of them has received one of them in their lab has received a Nobel Prize. And you look at this and say, hey guys, why don't you take a 20% of the cap table? I'm going to put the money in, and we are going to build this company together. And it's a virology company. It will be also addressing COVID-19 very soon. And we kind of built the company, and then we went to the stock market, raised another $120 million in that company. It's a well-capitalized. Alloware will be the first one of our companies that will go public later this year. And it'll be a good test run, so that should attract an enormous number of innovators to come and talk to us. So, and then on the innovation side, we will be at so much in the forefront, because unlike other companies, they only have experience with 1 or 2 drugs. We would have experience with 10 to 20 drugs, either our own companies or for other companies that we are doing a contract work. So we created a new model, and let's see how we will be able to fight with this concept in the next generation. So I just wanted to talk about recently, right, in my mother company, I raised around, last round was around, in 2018, I raised around 150 million. And I just closed in March, 170 million. And so many of you are in Singapore, so I just wanted to raise this because I met this lady, Su Yok, in January this year, and explained her what our model was. And what was very interesting is what she told us about Singapore's vision is that in the next 50 years, cell and gene therapy is where they want to put their bet. And she came in very big, large stake into our company and said, look, you guys have to partner with us because we haven't seen an innovation center of this kind of a concept before. And what is also happening in Singapore right now is, if you guys are following this, they are really, really in the forefront of transforming this COVID-19 situation. Innovation in the universities are really moving fast. But beyond innovation that's coming out of the research center, they do not have the technology how to convert a research-grade material to a GMP material. And that is a significant challenge in this kind of a business, because if you don't do that, you cannot really market this globally. So we were very fortunate that this large investment came from Singapore, and we have a tremendous support from both the Singapore government as well as the US and the European investors right now. So, we all together with our ecosystem and this path, it is a very expensive and risky path, but with 400 million in bank and try and create 1 or 2 IPOs within the next 2-3 years, we should be able to get to some level of innovation and see if we can really launch a drug by 2023 and go in the path of negative operating margin to a profitable zone. So coming to my last slide, what have I learned as an entrepreneur over the years? And I just wanted to share, because some of you guys, I reached out over the years, were, very nice of you to dial in today. But one thing you have to keep yourself, what we learned at AIM is you need to know what you don't know. Because if you're complacent or arrogant when you're moving fast and the growth pace is so fast, you've got to find a way to hire those who know more than you. So one of the principles we had in our company at Alexion is, if you're interviewing somebody to report to you, in that subject matter, that person has to be better than you, and you need to learn from the person. That's the only reason you hire the person. And it worked out really well, really well. Then, similarly, when you think about it, you need to reward these people, and you don't have cash. So it's a very interesting dichotomy, right? So you kind of you got to talk to your shareholders, get as much shares you can for these people, get it to them. And when I left Alexion, I had a interesting conversation with the chairman at that time. Out of the team that we had created there, 500 millionaires came out of that place, and we should feel very, very proud of what you accomplished over 10 years, right? So you need to be generous when you're playing that game, because you shouldn't be thinking that, oh, everything is only for the shareholders. No, it needs to be shared with the employees, and you have to win together. The second one, which if all the entrepreneurs on this call, I'd like to really recommend is look for 3-4 people outside of your company, because when you reach the top, it's very hard to ask some difficult questions and get some good advice. And I have to say, within the AIM alumni, I was really good to find Trinket, Hanud Singh, Sanjeev Narona, and many more, who I could really go out there and just, have a conversation, which is Prasanna, many of them, right? Just to have a conversation and say, look, I have this problem. How do I think through this? And, when somebody who completely doesn't know what you're doing, they will give you ideas that you would have never thought about. They'll help you think outside the box. And the last one that I would leave you guys with is dream big. Dream big. And there's a lot of no's. People kept telling me there was no market, 200 million market. They kept telling me you cannot launch the drug globally. They kept telling me you cannot raise debt in the market as a biotech. We proved everybody wrong. So there is a path. People said rare diseases, you can't make a business. We made a business, right? So there is always a path. Think outside the box and see the unseen, because that's the only way you'll get the premium. If you can get to the point where others don't see it, and this my round 2, I'm hoping that what we are doing is an unseen area to stay on the curve of innovation, because I see and I feel, and same as my team feels, that unless you innovate at a rapid speed, both on the technology front and on the cell and gene therapy front, this is the future, and we got to stay ahead of it. So please see the unseen. That's where our entrepreneur's value comes. I'm going to stop here and turn it to Nikhil now for Q&A.
Can you stop the share the screen so that you can see everybody?
You want me to stop sharing?
So you can see everybody.
Oh yeah, there you go. Happy to take questions. Live questions are better than written questions.
There are some written questions first.
Yeah.
The first question is, when would these therapies find its way into developing world? Should we wait till the therapy loses its exclusivity? Asking this because when the drug is launched in countries like India, would the same scale not make the therapies cheaper?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question, right? So when you start moving into the spectrum of high prices and drugs that are innovative, India will play a very important role, very, very important role. And one of the companies who's in the forefront driving this is Biocon in India, for example. I forget, she recently spoke in Boston to some of the CEOs of the companies. How can she bring innovation there? There's an interesting individual who's been working on this aggressively here in the United States. His name is Kush Parmer. He runs a very large VC. He's trying to bridge that gap between the two countries. What you will see is India is a little behind in this curve compared to China. China has gone so far ahead in innovation. They're putting money into innovation. India is still working at the back end, saying you take somebody's innovation and then produce it. They're not going in the forefront, right? So I think that gap has to be filled. But if you look at cell and gene therapy today, the innovation, as much as it is in US, it is in China too. And unfortunately, this Wuhan story came out of one of the innovation centers.
There's one more question, with companies like Novartis on the prowl in the market to acquire companies in CNG space, how is Alloware looking at placing themselves? Do they intend to be a subject of future acquisition target or stand by itself?
You know, it's a very good question because large pharma eventually you either can build a sustaining company with multiple drugs, or you have to put it as a home in a larger company. The reason being is your technology can generate maximum two, three drugs, unless you can be so successful and then expand, right? So a lot of times what happens is, and happened with Alexion, it'll happen with Alloware, is large pharma will come in, they will get either comfortable or not comfortable. If they get comfortable, they'll acquire you. If they don't get comfortable, you're on your own now. You're stuck. What happened with us in Alexion? And then we build a business, right? You can look at the story where, I know I can see Trinket's face because she was very instrumental in Genentech takeover by Roche. They took a step and took 50% equity in that company and just wanted to watch how it goes. And then at some point when the company went to $100 billion level, they went and bought the whole company, right? Some of them, so large pharma is playing in multiple ways. Novartis recently acquired Avexis for 11, 12 billion, and that's how they entered the cell and gene therapy. We will see in trillions of dollars coming from big pharma into this space. That's what my belief is.
Okay. There are some hands raised. I will call you all also, but I'll just go in the chronological manner. Venu has asked a question. Today, B Pharm or M Pharm degrees around the world still live with a chemically proved formula. How will you appeal to say we are not chemical bodies, we are bio? Start changing that.
Yeah, this is why we had to position ourselves in Boston, because Boston and San Francisco are the key places where schools are generating lots and lots of kids who have genetic engineering or gene therapy experience. You just can't find talent today. A kid coming out of a school today is getting 4 or 5 offers. So we are using unreal techniques to attract these kids. So my suggestion is if you're in the chemical world, you need to go back to school and learn that. Because without that, the next 50 years, you can't play the game in the high end of the business. Now, chemical business has gone away. There's still a lot of innovation going on there. So I wouldn't be surprised that there's still place in large pharma during that, but no biotech is going in that world.
Pankaj, you ask a question. Pankaj?
Yeah. Hi, Vikas. Did anybody tell you that you look like YC Deveshwar of ITC? But the question is.
Not related.
Okay, I know, but you look like him. So the question is, now you say you surround yourselves with good people as an entrepreneur. I've started a school, and the struggle I have is good people cost you.
Yeah.
So how does an entrepreneur strike that balance that you get the best resources and you don't even have to go out on a limb? Thanks.
So it's really, really good question. I can only answer for our industry, but I can feel the pain when you're in a not-for-profit or I don't know whether it's a not-for-profit or not, but what we normally do in a cap table, we kind of, when we raise our earlier Series A, Series B, and the seed money, we really separate the shareholders from the employees. And we take 15% of the cap table reserved for the employees and we distribute it, right? And even though you pay suboptimal, because we cannot pay what pharma pays. And we pay them much, much lower, even half the pay. But they are coming in, these young kids, they are coming in saying, okay, if I can make one drug successful, I can really make it big. Now, when you're talking about my model, even in that market, it's become competitive between 20 biotechs, right? Each one is selling their one drug. And I'm trying to sell, saying like, look, guys, you come into my innovation center, I'll give you a piece of 10 companies. If one of them is successful, you make money. If not, and theoretically 5 out of 10 should be successful, just mathematically, right? From the past. So you should be able to make in 5 and you'll lose in 5. So your life, a young age is not gone away. Think something outside the box like that. I don't have a solution because I haven't thought through a school, but there's very interesting few other people who are in that area, like Alan Massey, Hanuj Singh on the call. They may be able to jump in and give you some views on that if you can reach out to them.
Next question is from Rohit, MBA 2009. Can you please share a bit about your experience of dealing with investors? Any key things to keep in mind? That's the question.
Rohit, this is an evolution process, right? So I can give you a two-phase discussion. When I started at Alexion, I didn't have experience, and now I have experience, right? When I started at Alexion, it was one of the hardest job I ever did is stand outside for hours and hours with an investor to get an audience, and it was hard. It's a hard experience, and you got to get your story right. You have to show them value, how you can actually transform this, and you got to stick with your promise, right? One of the things, it takes an evolution process, but when you look back at the history of Alexion, 40 quarters, we never missed it. That's the kind of reputation you want to create, right? We beat earnings from 2007 till 2016 I left. There was not one quarter we missed. And you need to create reputation in the market. You need to create, and that comes slowly. Now this round, when I had to form this company, I had a run, and it takes an enormous effort. And I would be happy to talk to you one-on-one at some point.
The question from Bong Aspe ME3. What is your motivation and driving force in doing greatly?
I couldn't understand your question, Nikhil.
What he's asking is, while taking the great leap in your business, what is your motivation and the driving force?
Yeah, the motivation is finding, so if you really pull yourself back, it's about the thrill you get to see a patient come out of dead to life. It's a very different thrill. As a finance person, I'd never understood this, but when I met some of the patients or a father of a child who's on the deathbed and one dose gets the person out of the bed and the kid is running, that was the power of the therapy, right? So, the thrill that you see in a family, in the eyes of the patient, that gets you going. At some point, money doesn't matter. At today's stage, after success at Alexion, we don't have to work. We all can just sit and do something. But if I can do the same thing with another 5,000 to 10,000 people around the world over the next 10 years, it'll be a pretty fulfilling life.
Prerit Sood, go ahead.
Very good afternoon to you, Sinha sir. I
Hi.
think, you refreshed my memory of the Genentech case study, which we did in AIM way back, many years back. I was hearing, and you talked about terms like cryopreservation, getting some protocol clearances, coordinating with international bodies. I'm just curious, based on what you shared, that, see, there are a lot of peer competitors who are also doing the same. And, it's dealing with bureaucracy, working with your supply chain folks, working on the patients. So, what are the key differentiators which Alloware as a company has, has a unique proposition versus the other players in the market?
Good question, Sud. The way we work is we partner. That is the motto. We don't want to invest in supply chain. You want to work with, we have partnered with FedEx, for example, right? They do all the cryopreserve work. Our biggest difficulty right now, because nobody has done an allogeneic therapy launched in the market. There is none. We will probably be the first ones, right? By 2022, 23, unless somebody beats us. But what we don't know is, I'm going to transport the stuff to a hospital. What happens in the hospital? How secure they're going to keep it? And then, so how do I own this process, right? And in this process, the traditional wholesalers, wholesaling model just doesn't work. It does not work. So there is a complete innovation that is still yet to happen. People are coming. I'll give you, just to give an example, and I raised this question to Senji the other day, is it's costing us $2,000 to do a cryopreserved patient distribution today, $2,000 a patient. That's, and just to give you a comparison to antibodies, it's $50. And then you compare it to a chemical, it is cents, right? So we've got to find a way that that gets squeezed down significantly. There's a lot of innovation, a lot of entrepreneurship opportunities for people to come out and transform that area.
Next question, J. Doctora. Hi, do you see cell and gene therapy becoming affordable to ordinary people in the future?
We have to make it work, right? So here's the thing. When you do autologous therapies, it is because it takes 20 days of human intervention. It is very, very expensive. It's personalized, one person at a time. On the other end is the allogenic therapies. Allogenic therapies, my belief is, will be the area to go in the future, where you could have some kind of 1 to 1,000, one donor to 1,000 patient ratio. And the prices will come down and as the innovation moves faster and faster. You know, it's always, there's a premium price when you're in the early stage. You just enjoy that premium price. Probably will last for 5 more years, I would say.
A question from Vijay Sharda. Your model is to make multiple companies having one scientist as head. These are R&D companies and some may fail. Won't it be better to make a cooperative type model and everybody have a share so that they stay motivated irrespective of downfalls?
Exactly. So no, it's a good question, because what our model is, there's a shared service of all process development people, manufacturing, finance, all of these things are at the back end, and they share in all the 10 companies. The people, let's just say Professor Ann Lean, who's actually doing the aloe vera research, if I don't want her to share anything, I want her to be a large shareholder of the company she has. And that is the company I want her to really take it to the end and have victory with that. So we have to have a combination of two, right? And so there will be some people who are fully dedicated to that company and some people at the back. And we see that transition from the back end model to the front end model when you go to the what we call as a pivotal trial, which is a registration trial. When the risk is much lower, then you move. Like, for example, I'm right now looking at 6 or 7 medical officers to join in the shared service group. They will take care of these 10 companies. But when one company is going public, one of them will step in as a full-time into that, and he's going to be 100% dedicated into that company to make it successful. We have to then let the company go and live on its own. So we've kind of created a hybrid model.
Vikas, there's a question from Sasdev Ramakrishna. Vikas, yours is a fabulous story, one of chasing a really high value niche and coming tops. Among much upside in the journey, were there any sleepless nights? What aspects of the business were they about?
Oh, multiple. Oh my God, there were sleepless multiple nights. It's, the worst is the day the drug results are supposed to come out. Oh my God, in a small company, if it fails, you're dead. You have to go into a league. So, the date of that release, I'll give you an example. In 2006, January 28 was the release of the data from the bioanalytics group. And we were all working towards that. And one of the things my CEO had told me is, just make 2 plans. One is success. And if it fails, we're going to shut it down in February. We're going to fire everybody. And I had both the plans ready. And you just imagine how you would be spending that month. And not only that, the other times when the worst was, if you recall that slide, and when you look at the 2008 was a nightmare. The liquidity died in the market. We had $65 million left in the bank. A drug which has been launched for 8 months. and some of you guys who have been on the call who are pharma people, you will know that even in a best case, you can't make a company profitable, a drug profitable for 3 years. And I had 1 quarter to make it profitable. We shut down the Midwest. We only kept East Coast and West Coast as reps in Q2 of 2008, and 3 countries in US, and we shut everything down. And we made it profitable in 1 quarter. Nobody traveled. There was no food ordered in the company, and we all gave up our bonuses and salaries that time. That's how we did it. So these are the kind of crazy things you got to do. We paid people by stock, and everybody was happy later on, right? But that was tough.
There are many questions lined up, and they're interesting questions. Today, normally I stop these webinar questions at 5 o'clock. But today, when I'm reading those questions, can you take some more?
Yeah, I'm available. Don't worry,
guys. But do not flood anymore, because there's already plenty. So just a request. The next question is from Michael Sherwin. Based on your professional experience and expertise, will there ever be, and when do you think, an effective COVID-19 vaccine invented and out in the market? Which country will be successful?
You know, I think vaccines are much easier, much easier. I don't know if fully you understand the problem here, but this is a very important question. Vaccines is nothing but you are taking the virus in a very small dose and infusing it into the person, so the person develops their antibody, right? So the human immune system has to work. But I personally don't think that is the problem. I think the problem is people, as they age and they are obese or they have cardiovascular diseases, they don't have a good immune system. And those are the people who are dying. So vaccine can only help you to certain people who are healthy from getting an infection. But those who are dying are not the healthy people. So it just leaves you completely alone. I don't know if you want me to go a little bit deeper in that. I can even show you a slide how the whole COVID market is playing out right now. Nikhil, it's up to you. If you want, I can just show you.
No, I don't have any issues. I am free. You show the slide the last, so that will be the lasting impact.
Okay, whatever you say. I can actually put you in a frame. Who's playing where in this market? Just 1 second.
No problem.
What happens in this market, right? Yeah.
When the speaker is so enthusiastic, I can't stop him. And you're interesting too.
Sorry.
That's for us.
Let me just, I got to figure out how to do this.
So what I'm saying is, let's go to the question. Because otherwise you will lose time. Okay?
Yeah.
The next question is from Gaurav Batra. In a portfolio of acquisitions, how often do you encounter the occasional failure? Further, what is the process for cleaning up the resultant disruption?
And this is, Gaurav, this is specifically in the acquisition time?
Yeah.
Nikhil, I heard only half the question.
Yeah, okay, the question is, in a portfolio of acquisitions, how often do you encounter the occasional failure? What is the process for cleaning up the resultant disruption?
Yeah, it's the way I would say is if you look at that big circle slide I showed you, if you go further out in that circle, your failure rate is very high. So if I would say, if you're in the outermost of the circle, 8 out of 10 will fail. But if you go closer to the circle, maybe you have an 80% chance or 70% chance of winning. So we normally look at a portfolio where we kind of create, 3 very early stage, 3 mid-size, and 3 late stage, right? So you kind of diversify and manage your risk in a manner that you have some very close to the market. So for example, in Allovir, so for Elevate is my motherboard company. Allovir is one of the companies. So I've got 3 drugs in that is going to humans this year, and it's in pivotal trial. which means it's a registration trial. And the chance of winning in that is 50-50. If I go a little behind that where human trials have started, my chance is literally 1 out of 4 is going to succeed. And anything that is before that in preclinical, which is where I'm testing it in mice or something, it is going to be probably 1 out of 10. But the way you model it in finance is you just apply the risk factor and just say, I'm going to pay you probably $1 million for a mice model, but I would be paying you $10 million for this. But I would pay you 250 for where the probability of success is 50%, and maybe $1 billion when it is further gone, right? I mean, it's interesting, but recently, I mean, if you follow this, there was a company called one of the biotech company in cell and gene therapy got bought out by Gilead a few months back, and they have just entered phase 1, but the technology seems so exciting to Gilead. They think this drug is going to make $50 billion in sales in the future. So they put a bet at 10% probability of success and gave the company at $4.9 billion. It's a recent acquisition. So the question is, how big can big be in this market, right? It was a company run by 17 people, and they were able to sell it for $5 billion, right? It's so, and then there are other analogs where you can't even sell. Like Alexion, nobody wanted to buy it for 200 million when the drug was already launched, right? So the cell and gene therapy area where right now where everybody is running towards and trying to get a pace, you definitely will get a premium. While if you have something on chemical, your chance of getting a premium is very low.
Hanut, you can go ahead, ask a question. Hanut?
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Hi, Vikas. What a fantastic story, man. What a fantastic story. I have 2 questions for you. One is something I'm sure some of us are thinking, or maybe how do little guys like us play along with you and make a little bit of money? And the second one is that, you mentioned that India is far behind China. And do you think that India will catch up with China and with all this COVID stuff that's going on, will the US push manufacturing to China?
So, so the two things in this, right? Was there did you finish your question?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. So 2 questions. How do you play in that, and then the China story? It's very, very hard for an individual investor to figure out which company to put the money, because you don't have the technology, you don't have the time or the education to figure this out. There are lots of ETFs available out there, and I'm happy to take you through that, Hanut, whenever you get a chance. And you and I are speaking this weekend, so we can talk about it. But Fidelity has ETFs, T. Rowe has ETFs, and these ETFs actually, there are a bunch of good scientists sitting behind these ETFs that actually look at where to take risk. And more and more biotechnology specific ETFs are coming up, and they have had a tremendous run. Or even in this kind of scenario, the volatility is there, but I haven't seen those indexes getting hurt. So happy to share some of those. Obviously, you can always invest in companies like ours, but it's a single binary risk, right? Yeah.
Because Hanut very well, he has your number. Others don't have. So you can tell, Hanut can talk to you later, but other people will not have that opportunity. Sorry.
Yeah. So I'm happy to recommend more ETFs if you want, but let's go to the China story, right? China is a very interesting story. I'm actually consulting, I'm also a consultant, a financial consultant to a very large Chinese company, and I can give you a story of that. It's called Beigene, B-E-I-G-E-N-E, if you ever Google that. And they went from, when I started, the CFO of Beigene lives next door to me in Boston. And they took it from probably, if you look at the chart for 5 years, they took it from like a very small company to a 15 billion company in a very short time. And their technology that they start, the Chinese government has provided them probably $1 billion worth of infrastructure, right? They were able to raise in the Hong Kong market more than a couple of, I mean, he just did a secondary run right now for $1 billion raise. And it's crazy. Like even in this storm of COVID, one of the biotech companies launched it in China and had 600 times oversubscription. So the cash that these people have at their disposal is like, just to give you an example, in US, if you're 10 times oversubscribed in your IPO, you are like blown. This was 682 times oversubscribed. When, you know, the day you put the, you know, you have some idea and put it in, it just blows up, right? India is very different in that the capital market is not ready for this kind of innovative stuff and stay 8-10 years with a loss-making company and continue to fund it, right? And the other one is, you know, the Indian entrepreneurship is not still, very few companies have come up like Biocons. Biocon still, when I hear Lady Mazumdar there, she still wants to create a profitable company with earned EPS. That world doesn't exist in the biotech world. You want to have a loss-making deal for 4 or 5 years and then sell it to big pharma. And that model still hasn't resonated in the Indian community, right? So it's a different side of the risk taking. And the reason why companies are successful in US and Europe and China is, you know, the large pharma doesn't want to have that big dent in their books for completely wild innovation. And so they are willing to pay when you are successful, but they're not willing to put money in kind of wild stuff. The serendipity part is only a piece of their budget, right? And here, at least I would say $400 billion is being put into serendipity in US right now on an annual basis, which is mind-blowing, right? So that's probably where, but you know, when you look at the companies here, the Indians have moved here and they have done phenomenally well. Putting their, like Sun, for example, pharmaceuticals, they have put a biotechnology wing here and they have taken multiple bets and they're very successful. And one of the companies that they have taken a bet, we also are trying to talk to them. So it's a good ecosystem.
Okay, now last 4 questions. One is from Sandeep Botra. He mentioned that given China has a dominance in API and a lot of new molecule development are dependent on that, how you see this changing post-COVID-19? Will India gain the most, or do you think the European Union or US will build up their manufacturing for APIs as well?
You know, APIs are all outsourced now to India, China, all of the place. China is the biggest supplier of API. I think there will be a little bit of a noise, but I think that Chinese muscle is so strong. It'll take, I mean, India is also competitive. So I think the shift is, I don't think the shift is going to happen. But there will be a lot of noise in the interim, where if you want to take advantage of this China bashing time, I think it's a good time to go out there and pitch yourself. But you know, companies equally are there from Korea, and some of Singapore are also big players sourcing out of China and then repackaging it. So I would say China's position is very hard to move.
This is a tongue twister question. I hope it's a long question. I hope you can get it the first time. It's from my friend Darshan Ganguly. Can you look at pharma/insurance companies working at the R&D capital stack at BioElevate? That way they get a look through on the IP and FDA processes and fund work on the economies of scale and tech innovation to deliver the service at lower costs.
You know, this is from pharma side, I think there's a spot on. There's a partnerships with pharma is kind of a no-brainer. You kind of, you know, when we are running companies, we're running with 17, 20 people. Pharma has thousands of people who have such deep experience, right? And so at some point when you're moving to a clinical trial, getting their experience in is invaluable. If you can partner with them, oh my God, you could get to 50 countries within hours versus you could take 2-3 years and you will lose the area under the curve, right? So there's no brainer there. On the other hand, the insurance companies are looking at this business as such a lucrative business from multiple angles. You know, the patient level insurance.
Jay Chaudhary, your batchmate. What is the risk in your model? Do you see any risks similar to what Gilead's HCV drugs did to PEG intron?
Oh, that risk is very different. That risk is very, very different, right? And if I were to tell you one person in this place who can tell you deep inside is Teresa, who's drinking.
Should I unmute her? Okay.
Yeah, just unmute her. Maybe
yeah,
she was in the middle of that crisis. So, Trinket, why don't you answer that question?
So, Maria, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, morning, or good evening to everybody. Yeah, I would say for that particular story, it's all around how you innovate and improve outcomes for patients. Because at the time when Pegasus and PEG intron, the efficacy rate was around about 50%, right? And so if you were on the receiving end of that medicine, you would want more. The duration of treatment for genotype 1 is 48 weeks and a 50% success rate. And so I think what Gilead successfully has done is, first of all, make the medicine more convenient and shorter duration. So it was, you know, in therapeutics and in medicine, it's all around how you improve outcomes and make it better for patients, which is what Vikas is talking about. And so I was in the middle of that because I was lead for Pegasus for Genentech at the time when we saw the innovation in hepatitis C happening. First, it's dual combination with injectables, then it became triple combination, and then we went into orals. I mean, the question, if you were a patient, would you rather inject yourself or take an oral medicine? And the cure rates were really like skyrocketing from 50%, 75% to 80%. So for us in the health industry, what drives me is all around how you can create better outcomes for patients. This is why, you know, I come to work and do what I do.
Thanks, Trinket.
Yeah, and the second part of that question, Sanjay, was the risk. And you know, there's the business risk of looking at whether the drug will fail or succeed. But you know, you want to kill the drug much quicker. And if you're feeling even slightest view that this is not going to make it, so sometimes, you know, taking the loss earlier is a good thing than to keep going till the end. But on the other hand, there are so many financing risks. I was so worried about this COVID-19 crisis and so I was left at January, I had $50 million left in the bank. And I had just started talking to people and this crisis happened. But to my surprise, that I was able to raise a couple of $100 million in this crisis, and which I closed in March, and I'm doing the other round of another 200 now. So, you know, having cash is one of the best things you can do in a crisis like this. At least you can sleep well.
The question from Anu: through the modification of gene expression, epigenetics, is there a potential to alter the length of telomeres?
Whew, this is too sciencey. I really don't know the answer. I really don't know the answer. This is way too much science.
Well, last question from Manish Panchal. As an CFO, your outlook would be different from innovators and technocrats who are emotionally attached. At what time or milestone do you decide to stop the loss? Also, is your funneling process completely digitalized?
So yeah, so so the second question is an extremely important question. I'm going to get to that now, later. But the first one, you know, we all watch it on a monthly basis, how things are going and how results are coming out with the mice models and then the human models, you know, one failure can kill people, right? One failure can kill people. And I'm gonna, you know, the risk profile versus what the outcomes could be, you've got to take the risk. But then there are other areas where you have to say, okay, now this probably doesn't have a solution, because you've got to innovate 17, 18 times before you actually make a human innovation drug. And in that process, where do you stop? There's a committee that we form, and we look at it from pros and cons and ethics and legal liabilities, because you could be sitting in a bad legal liability if you do the same thing again. And you kind of bring a monthly basis. We kind of either say it's going to proceed or it's going to die. So it's a very methodical process. The second one, which you're talking about, is technology, right? When I was working at Bayer, and you know, some of you guys were there with me, high throughput screening was a very, very important way of looking at screening things, right? What you do in that is you have a library of 5 million compounds, and with a computer system, you kind of look at, let's say, a tumor and see which one is going to be effective mathematically, and then select 8 or 10, and then you kind of bring it down, right? Then, you know, with the antibodies, that stuff also got eventually developed, because it wasn't very difficult to program this. We are struggling with the cell and gene therapy. And one of my ideas right now is to create a synthetic biology company, which I'm looking for partners. And the idea there is, if you can take the human genome database and then you look at the target and you can narrow down which are the 5 or 7 genes I need to really tamper with that will react well with this particular target, my success rate could go up significantly. Right now, we are at the mercy of the research centers who kind of do hit and trial with 50 to 100 and not millions, right? So theoretically speaking, you know, there's one company which is not very successful, but it's called Cyros and run by MIT Professor Richard. And Richard's theory right now is that the world has only gone into 1% of the cell's genome construction. 99% we haven't understood. So how much have we missed right now, right? And so there's a convergence of this coming up. There's one company in Boston that has come out of MIT called Ginkgo Bioworks, right? Some of you probably would have heard about him. And then there's one similar company just got formed, SoftBank funded that, Zymogen. And what they do is a very similar thing, but they have started with crop sciences, where what they're saying there is, if I can genetically modify crops, the seeds of corns, right? And this is one of their biggest product with Bayer, actually. Then you don't need fertilizer. I can just kind of figure this out. But how do I do this, right? So these young kids formed this company, and one of the founders is an Indian girl, really proud of her. And so they're transforming that, and now they're entering biologicals to do it for humans. And their supercomputers are like really unbelievable. But have they gotten to the phase or not? It's still 10 years away. I think there's a major opportunity there, which we have a chance.
Thank you, Vikas. We have overshot by nearly 25 minutes, but
Sorry.
No.
But I never showed my slide. I never showed my slide. Next time.
Please show it
Okay.
right now. Please show. You can show it.
So, okay, let me just do this. So what's happening with COVID? That was the question, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at this side of the curve on the left-hand side, this is a normal human being, all the people here. This is the pulmonary epithelium, where, you know, which is a normal stuff. This is the area where it's supposed to be clean air. And then your cells are down here. So when SARS-CoV hits you, on a moderate people like who are healthy, it goes inside through this pulmonary epithelium, goes into this area, and what we call is a cytokine storm. It's a very mild cytokine storm, which is your own body's antibodies are coming to kill this as a foreign element, right? And then if it passes through this, then it goes and kills your T cells and enters your cells like these little cells here. And then your number of counts starts dropping. In a severe COVID-19, the number of cells depletes so much that your immune system is completely compromised now. And so what are we doing right now, right? When you start looking at here, so antiviral agents, remdesivir, which is, they're talking a lot about it, they're solving this problem here. Then we have all of these antibodies trying to get here, but nobody's getting here because this is the problem. And once the people who are dying, they're dying here. And we will be launching our drug, Alovir 109, by taking these people who have been exposed to COVID-19 and take their cells out. And then with an algorithm, we're going to match this individual with 25 donors that we have shortlisted around the world and try to infuse it here. So this place, and it'll be programmed in a way that it'll look at that particular cell that is infected by SARS, and it's going to go and blow it out. So that was my story. All right.
Well, I mean, what can I say? I have already got 2-3 voice messages saying that this is one of the most outstanding webinars which has taken place. So,
thank you.
And the equanimity with which you have answered the question. And I don't know if you're a CFO or you are a biologist or a nuclear, because you don't come across the finance guy at all. I mean, the way you answered the questions and the way you went about the presentation, hats off.
Thank you.
And the questions which came in were very interesting. And really, when Sanjeev had suggested your name, and you know how Sanjeev is, boss, isko tum lena. Sorry for other people, you should take him. So I said, Biotech Company, God damn it. We are people, we want to ask questions. What questions will be asked? 2-3 people messaged me, sir, today not many questions, it will get over. And I just told them that this is going to go overtime. Because I think one session of yours will not be enough. We'll have to have many more sessions, and we will space it out. We'll have some kind of a series with you. And I have got a public demand, again, Sanjeev has recommended that Trinket should be one of our speakers.
Yes.
And so Trinket, the homework for you is you have to do something different than what he has said. Okay.
So I'll just give you a little background on Trinket. She was one of the persons I would call all the time because she was very instrumental in consolidating Genentech into Roche. She was in, so she and I worked at Bayer's acquisition cell. We bought multiple companies together, multiple nights in New York, right? Trying to get the deals closed. And she was my go-to person whenever I had a trouble understanding and the business. And one of the models she taught me about how to market a high-priced drug in the United States with, remember that drug we bought from Alza? Yeah, that is the exact model that made Alexion successful. We just kept it, kept the same model, replicated it. So great kudos to Trinket for all these years.
My hatchet man is Sanjeev Narona to get people. So that's what Sanjeev. So you have to get Trinket. And thank you again, Vikas.